Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming and thank you for showing up early. Today, I'm Councilmember Will Jawando, joined by my colleague, Councilmember Sayles. Today, as we stand here together for what is an annual proclamation now in the county or for the last few years to recognize the work of the Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission, I want to acknowledge that this is a special one in light of the increased concerns and fears within our community in light of the results of the election last week. As one of the original sponsors of the legislation creating this commission, along with former Councilmember Hans Remer, co-sponsored by all colleagues, I'm honored to continue to support the vital mission of shedding light on our county's history, as well as fostering healing, resilience, and repair among all of our residents. The commission was established to address our county's history of racial terror and to help chart a path toward reconciliation. Today, as we witness a rise in divisive rhetoric and threats to our equality, the commission's work is more important than ever. Our history reminds us of the need to always confront hate and fear, and it reinforces our collective commitment to a community that values dignity and justice for every human being. In a diverse community like ours, there are many who are understandably concerned about this hateful rhetoric that has intensified. We must acknowledge these fears and recognize that our county and our country has a history of exclusion and systemic violence that has left scars that continue to impact Black, brown, immigrant communities in particular, as well as our entire community. This past week has highlighted the urgency of recommitting to our shared values and standing firm against any threats to inclusion, equity, and justice in Montgomery County. As an elected official, along with my colleague, Councilmember Sayles, who you'll hear from momentarily, we stand here today on one of these sites of racial terror. There are two markers outside commemorating Mr. Sidney Randolph and Mr. John Diggs Dorsey, who were dragged violently from this building and lynched nearby. I can't express fully how often I think about that. One of the commission's first acts was to create lifetime memorials to those two men, as well as Mr. George Peck, who was lynched in Poolsville. Our painful history of lynching, of segregation, of discrimination continues to shape who we are today, manifesting in disparities in housing, in education, and mass incarceration. The history compels us to recognize that remembrance alone is not enough. We must act decisively and consistently to dismantle systemic barriers and protect the civil rights and human rights of all of our residents, especially amid the current climate in our country. Now more than ever, remembrance must be paired with action. We must continue fighting for equitable educational opportunities, the end of discriminatory practices in housing and employment, and a fair criminal justice system. These actions are crucial if we are to protect and uplift every resident, particularly in the environment where these hard-won rights that we thought we had secured are under threat. We must also stand united against the hateful rhetoric and divisive policies that threaten to undermine our community. So thank you to each member of this commission and to everyone in our county who has lifted up our shared history. I know together we can continue to build a Montgomery County where justice, compassion, and equity remain our guiding principles today and always. I want to acknowledge that the county executive's here. Ask him to come up, and then we'll hear from Councilmember Sayles, then the county executive, and then we will hear from the chair of the commission and Director Stowe.
Thank you. To my colleague, Councilmember Jawando, and everyone involved with the Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission for joining us today and leading this proclamation along with the chair of the Commission on Remembrance and Reconciliation, Mr. Jason Green. Together, we proclaim the significance of Remembrance and Reconciliation Month. especially as we observe the 160th anniversary of Maryland's Emancipation Day. Your presence here today is a testament to the importance of community engagement in this essential and ongoing work. This month challenges us to confront our painful history, learn from our past, and take decisive action toward a united and inclusive future. We must deepen our understanding of our county's history, particularly regarding the lynching of 3 men in the late 1800s: George Peck, John Diggs Dorsey, and Sidney Randolph. By doing so, we can foster healing. I would like to recognize the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project, the Montgomery County Lynching Memorial Project, and the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission for their vital efforts to memorialize these tragic events. And I believe Maryland currently is the only state with a Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission. The commission recently held a critical public hearing to raise awareness about racial violence and to promote justice. I'm also grateful to our public school system for its crucial role in providing students with an age-appropriate curriculum about African American history. This education is a key step in fostering understanding and reconciliation. While our past does not define who we are today, we stand here to honor those who suffered and to affirm our commitment to creating a more just and equitable future. Despite our challenges, we are determined to share our history and work tirelessly toward a brighter future for all. This commitment is a source of hope and inspiration for us all. Thank you.
First, I want to thank Will Jawando, Laurie-Anne and Sayles for this, and I know the council is supporting this in its entirety. This is truly something that all of us in the county take great interest in. I want to thank the Reconciliation Committee for the work you're doing, and that the work you're going to keep doing, and we'll probably have to do even more of. I had a conversation this weekend which was a bit surreal. Somebody I know was working on for a federal agency and was putting together their plan for the next year. By Thursday of last week, they were rewriting the plan to remove any references to DEI out of it and to figure out how they can say or try to do what they know they need to do without triggering an evaluation that'll say this is DEI, you just didn't use the words. That is frightening, and it's frightening for all of us. And the damage that this administration is going to do, I think, is deeper than any of us imagine, and that makes our work all the more important now. We've got to try to find ways to build an atmosphere in which people live with and understand each other. Montgomery County, I think, I've said this more than once, pretty much every square inch of this place was a plantation 200 years, 165 years ago. That's pretty remarkable. That's a lot of plantations. We don't talk about it. We don't really remember it. It would be interesting if we actually started marking out where the plantations were around there so people had a sense of just how much of this place was under plantation control. And Maryland and Montgomery County continued discrimination in schools up until 1960. This is not like ancient history. I remember when I was a school teacher, I would talk to my kids and I'd say, this is what happened. I'd say, guys, I was alive for this. This isn't something you're reading out of a book. This isn't somebody else's story about your community. This is your community. This is where you live. This is where you grew up. And these are the institutions that prevailed. And in this county, we've got serious issues with education. And we've been talking about an achievement gap for nigh on 40 years now. And when you've got a problem that goes on that long and the numbers aren't much better than they were, you have a continuing problem, and it's not genetic, it's systemic. And that's the fundamental of all the problems we face is systemic discrimination and systemic racism, which bars opportunities to people. And this will not change until we are able to be more effective of convincing everybody and showing everybody what happened here, that this isn't about reliving the past, but it's about understanding how the present was created. And if you don't understand how we got here, you're not going to have the tools to figure out how we get out of here. And some little self-reflection and acknowledgement of the role that particularly white people played in the creation of this mess is necessary. So I want to thank you for the work you do. I look forward to working with you going forward. I wish it was an easier path. It would have been nice if from top to bottom in this country everybody was rowing in the same direction, but we've rowed in different directions before. And if we have to row in a different direction, we'll do that now, because I think our residents and our society need people who are willing to say, no matter what you say in the White House, we're going to stand for peace and justice and equality and make sure we do the things that we need to do so the future generations don't have to live in conditions that were created by the past. So thank you for giving me an opportunity.
Thank you, County Executive Elrich. We're going to hear from, in this order, 2 minutes. Despite what we just did, you're going to be 2 minutes, please. Director Jim Stowe, our Director of Office of Human Rights, Jason Green, who's the chair of our Commission on Reconciliation and Remembrance, and Dr. Tracy Oliver Gary, who is the supervisor for pre-K through 12 social studies, who's doing great work at MCPS with understanding history. So in that order, Jim Stowe, Jason Green, and Dr. Oliver Gary.
Southern trees bear a strange fruit. Blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging into the southern breeze. Strange fruit hanging from poplar trees. Pastoral scene of a gallant South. The bulging eyes and the twisted mouth. Scents of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the trees to drop. Here is a strange and bitter crop. Thank you to Councilmember Jawando and Councilmember Sayles and members of council and County Executive Elrich, and for all of you who gathered today for this proclamation, to our partners around the county and throughout the state of Maryland. This lyric of lynching in the South may be as dark and controversial now as it was then in 1939, as Billie Holiday sang in a small cafe, remembering that her father died of a lung disease because he could not get treatment at the White Hospital. The responsibility of the acts described in these lyrics must be remembered and accepted, not out of some awokeness consciousness, but out of realization that the acceptance of responsibility, the remembrance and acknowledgement of its occurrence can lead to a pathway of peace of mind, forgiveness, and even the especially difficult work of reconciliation by those who were victims and those who were victimized. For George Peck, John Diggs Dorsey, and Sidney Randolph, Montgomery County is seeking to move beyond by parties unknown as those responsible for the unlawful death of these men. We want to move to a place where we are responsible. Both the perpetrator, those who stood by, and those paralyzed by fear are all among us, by heritage or by inference. But so are those who are committed to move forward and pledge to participate fully and place high importance on the difficult work of reconciliation. That would be, in a small part, justice for these men and the beginning of healing for our community.
In Montgomery County, November is Remembrance and Reconciliation Month. My name is Jason Green. I'm the chair of the county's Commission on Remembrance and Reconciliation. It's my great honor to serve with the members of this commission and to work with this collection of community partners. I'm one of those descendants that the county executive was just talking about. My grandfather's grandfather is a product of enslavement, not in Montgomery, Alabama, in Montgomery County, Maryland, in Rockville, across the street. So this work isn't theoretical, it's very real, it's very personal. Those stories exist in me and in the members of this community. And when I first learned about the history of racial terror lynching in our community, what I thought was individual vigilante justice, I learned were organized, orchestrated acts of community. And that's why this collection of people is so important, because we stand as a community to push back, to stand in the gap, to sit and witness, and to say never again. I remember when we were having conversations with the community about establishing a marker, and someone said, that's not who we are anymore. Why dig up all of this? That's long in the past. And I said, what an opportunity to say that out loud. What an opportunity to say in one united voice exactly who we are and what we stand for and what we stand against and what we won't allow to happen in our community. November in Montgomery County is Remembrance and Reconciliation Month. The commission, given the charge by Councilmember Jawando and Sayles and President Friedson and the rest of the commission, has planned events for our citizenry, for you to engage, to remember this difficult history, not for dramatization, but so that we can start from a line of truth. Because we know that truth is itself its own act of resistance. And so we ask you to engage in the events that we and our partners have planned, but also to engage in your own. To engage in your own conversations around your own tables, with your own families, with your own communities, with your own communities of worship and institutions of community. Because no longer can the work of racial and social justice be a spectator sport. Great Marylander Frederick Douglass once said that education means emancipation. It means the uplifting of light into the glorious light by which we can all be set free. That's what these people are doing in their work to educate. It's to emancipate us. And that's why the work that the next commissioner that you'll hear from is so critical. The work that's been done to ensure that this difficult past is actually enshrined in curriculum, that the next generation will hear these stories and learn the lessons that happened here in our community is so critical as we think about moving this story out of the darkness and building a legacy that will take us all into that glorious light of truth. Tracy?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Tracy Oliver Gary, and I am the proud pre-K-12 supervisor for Montgomery County Public Schools. When I joined the commission to represent MCPS, and I began to reflect on what does remembrance mean in the context of a school system? What does reconciliation mean in the context of a school system? And at the same time, I was in public spaces, and MCPS had gone through a system-wide anti-racist audit, and I began to think about how can we begin to make room for the history that has been made invisible, purposefully, intentionally left out, and intentionally left out. And I mean by intentionally left out because there was no intentionality about learning about it. Okay. And so MCPS, we began to ask ourselves, what do we want our students to know? Who do we want our students to be? And so we began, with the support of the system of MCPS and the commission, to build relationships with community members and community organizations to learn about the history that is not on the internet, that is not in a book. And you do that through oral histories. And we began to craft lessons and got approval for mandated kindergarten through 12th grade lessons in the month of November that's focused on local African American history. And we've done this for the last 3 years. Each grade band has age-appropriate lessons. The first year, we focused on educating our community, our students about there were 40 African American communities that existed post-emancipation. Where were they? How did they thrive? What difficulties did they face? How did people fight the resistance? And how do people try to preserve that history today? The second year, we focused on landmarks. When you pass by this in Montgomery County, in your community, do you know the significance to that landmark for its African American history? And this year, our lessons are focused on the fight for equality. We partner with the commission to have students to conduct oral histories with community members, and those oral histories are featured in this year's lessons. And we're asking students to grapple with the question, what is freedom? What does it mean? And where do people not experience freedom today? And what can you do about it? And then also in the month, we support local organizations that do emancipation celebrations. We give students service learning hours for attending them. We promote them. And we also had our own central office 160th anniversary of Emancipation Day celebration as well. Additionally, we have a Changemaker workshop that we have every year. And in this Changemaker workshop, we teach students how to advocate. Because the reconciliation is, for the remembrance is the history. The reconciliation is making room at the table for the history. But also the reconciliation piece is how do we make sure that our community is always moving forward for social justice? And that work doesn't just happen naturally. You have to learn how to do it. And so we have a workshop that's virtual where students earn student service learning hours, and we partner with local advocates and activists, and they teach our students what they're doing, how they do it, in order to inspire students to take up their own mantles and fight, or their own battles. Like where do they see a lack of social justice, and what can they do about it? And so our goal, when we ask ourselves, what do we want our students to know? We want our students to understand what were the conditions that allowed for racial terror against Black men to exist. What was that history? What were the conditions? What's the legacy of that? How do we still experience it today? And what do we want our students to do? We want our students to work to end injustice. And so I thank the commission for the space. I thank the county council for creating the commission. And I am honored to be able to be a part of this work. And I am so grateful that I work for a system that, and I will be honest, that has never said no to this work and has 100% supported it. So thank you.
All right, we're going to read the proclamation, rotating between the county executive, Councilmember Sayles, and I, and then we will take a picture. Whereas, from its inception, Montgomery County was stolen land, made home to thousands of individuals whose agency was stolen through enslavement, and we recognize that the local and regional economy benefited from the exploitation of their labor. Following emancipation, racism and oppression persisted in systems and institutions. Racialized terror was committed as a means of subjugation. Segregation was enforced in schools, public facilities, and housing. Covenants and zoning plans were adopted to separate African Americans and white people, while equal and equitable services were not provided to African American neighborhoods and residents. And
whereas we solemnly acknowledge and remember Mr. George Peck, Mr. John Diggs Dorsey, and Mr. Sidney Randolph, 3 known victims of racial terror, lynchings in Montgomery County between 1890 and 1896, whose lives were tragically and unjustly taken without due process through acts of racist violence that terrorized African American communities.
Whereas the Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission was created by the Montgomery County Council in 2019 in support of the goal of bringing the community together to promote understanding of this troubled history and to seek reconciliation among residents. The council acknowledged the terror that racism and lynching created among the African American communities throughout the United States, including Montgomery County. This legacy perpetuates divisions that are reflected in current inequities and disparities, as well as weakened patterns of voting and civic participation. And
whereas the Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission works in partnership with many organizations, many who are here today, including the Arts and Humanities Council, Montgomery County Public Schools, Montgomery History, and the Montgomery County Lynching Memorial Project, among others. We honor the righteous work done to research the stories of the 3 known Montgomery County lynchings, the 3 known, there are many unknown, collect soil samples, and establish markers in the county in their memory. And
whereas the state of Maryland celebrates Emancipation Day on November 1st, marking the date when a new state constitution ended the horrific institution of slavery in Maryland in 1864. This year marks the 160th anniversary of emancipation in Maryland, which occurred 1 year before the passage of the 13th Amendment by the federal government, and as a reminder of our capacity to engage in acts of reconciliation, initiates November as a month of remembrance and reconciliation. And
whereas Montgomery County is now home to multi-ethnic communities whose awareness of the deplorable racism and history of discrimination against African Americans cannot be assumed. By openly commemorating, reflecting upon, and grieving the injustices of the past, the county can work to heal and facilitate community-wide reconciliation.
now therefore be it resolved that the county executive and the county council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby celebrate the month of November as Remembrance and Reconciliation Month, and be it further resolved that the county council and the county executive encourage all county residents to join together in the pursuit of equity, mutual understanding, and moral justice by renewing these commitments each November, and to engage in personal and communal acts of remembrance and reconciliation presented on this day, the 12th of November in the year 2024, signed by myself, Councilmember Sayles, County Executive Elrich, Council President Friedson, on behalf of the entire council. Thank you and happy Reconciliation and Remembrance Month.